We are already 2/3 of the way through the season in the NFL. That's right, only a third of the regular season remains to be played. The race to be in the postseason and book a place in the playoffs is hotting up. The Kansas City Chiefs have rediscovered their winning touch, and the Philadelphia Eagles just continue to find ways to win. If you are in Carolina, though, the picture isn't so bright. We've already had our first head coach firing of the year. Frank Reich was given just 11 games in charge before he was sent packing this week. Carolina, insistent. Everything they gave up to get quarterback Bryce Young in this year's draft with the first overall pick was bang on the money. Their head coach, though, seemingly isn't the right man for the job. He's gone. They're heading in a different direction. What of the show? Well, unfortunately, it was a losing record. 1-2 against the line in Week 12. It's still a winning record on the season. What does Week 13 hold in store? Well, let's find out as we turn the page onto the new week of action in the NFL.
Graves on Gridiron with Richard Graves.
Well, welcome along to the show. I am your host, Richard Graves. This is Graves on Gridiron. And as I always start out, if you are new to subscribing to this podcast, it's great to have you on board. We might have already missed two-thirds of the season, but the good news is there's still another 6 weeks plus the playoffs to go. The format is simple. Each week we look at the slate of games on offer in the NFL. I then pick three, look at the line set by the odds makers. We break down those matchups. I give my opinion on which way I think is the way to err and whether or not the odds makers have got it right or wrong. 1-2 against the line in Week 12. The Buffalo Bills delivered for us, covering with 24 points as a minimum for them. Well, they passed that comfortably. The Denver Broncos, though, showed a little offense themselves as they scored over 20 points. And the New Orleans Saints, despite being 1.5-point underdogs going into their game against the Atlanta Falcons, couldn't cover that. And so it's a 1-2 record against the line on the season. That means our record now stands at 19-17. And when you consider the horrific start we had through the first 2 weeks when we went 1-5 against the line, the record since Week 3 stands at a rather impressive 18-12. Can we improve on that this week? Well, let's find out. We'll look at this week's matchups imminently. But first of all, what of the poll that we put up on Monday morning? Following another weekend of results and impressive performances, come from behind wins, I asked the question on X. Through 12 weeks, who do you feel is the best team in football? Is it indeed the Philadelphia Eagles with their league-leading 10-1 record? Is it the Baltimore Ravens? They're on a bye this week. Their record stands at 9-3. The San Francisco 49ers, who go to Philly this week, their record stands at 9-3. Or the Kansas City Chiefs, who improved to 9-3 with their impressive win down there in Las Vegas? Or could it be someone else? Well, I can tell you over 1,000 of you got involved with this poll. One person pointed out, fairly enough, in my opinion, that the Jacksonville Jaguars perhaps should have been on there. A little bit disappointment that they weren't on that 14 poll. But of the 4 teams, 50% of you, that's exactly half, felt the Philadelphia Eagles are in fact what their record says they are. And it says they're the best team in football right now. The 49ers came in second. 28% of you voted for the 49ers. 13% for the Baltimore Ravens. Just 9% felt that the reigning, defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, with their 9-3 record, are currently the best team in football. Well, will that change in Week 13? Let's find out now as we look at 3 more games, picks from this week's slate. And we start with the 8-3 Detroit Lions going into Louisiana to take on the 5-6 New Orleans Saints. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it's the Lions who are starting out as 4-point favorites. But both of these teams come into this one on the back of a disappointing Thanksgiving Day loss, or Thanksgiving week loss, should I say. While the Lions this year, through their form, are afforded a little bit of breathing space, the same can't be said in their own division for the New Orleans Saints. 2 red zone turnovers were critical last weekend in the defeat to the Atlanta Falcons. One went for a pick 6, and that now ultimately means that not only did they lose that game, they're now looking up chasing their NFC South rival Atlanta Falcons for the first place in the NFC South. It was another game where they suffered yet more injuries, most notably star wide receiver Chris Olave didn't finish that game. He left with a concussion. already remember their best cornerback, Marcus Lattimore, is sidelined. And now the prospect of facing this Detroit Lions team, you have to say, is quite a daunting one. For their part, Detroit got out of jail when beating the Bears 2 weeks ago. On Thanksgiving Day against the Green Bay Packers, they were not so lucky. Quarterback Jared Goff has now committed 6 turnovers in the space of just 2 games, 3 interceptions, 3 fumbles lost. Frankly, that's just not good enough. And against this Saints defensive front, ball security has to be much more improved. In fact, that's the only way I see the Saints having a chance to win this game. If their defense can steal a couple of possessions, they're in the game. If Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions look after the ball, there's only one winner. Look, New Orleans struggled to get the ball into the end zone. We touched upon this through last week's show, and that was highlighted again against the Falcons when they scored 15 points in the game. All 15 came by the way of field goals, 5 in total. On the other side of the field this week, Detroit have an offense which is explosive. Whether it's Montgomery or Gibbs coming out of the backfield, Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver, or rookie tight end Sam Laporta, everywhere you look, the Lions have playmakers. And against a depleted New Orleans Saints team, I think that's just too much firepower to deal with. Even in the error-strewn 2-game run we've seen over the last fortnight from the Lions, if Green Bay had settled for field goals and not scored touchdowns, Detroit likely goes on to win that game, as they did against the Chicago Bears. Look, this may be a close game for the first 2 quarters, given it's been played down in New Orleans. But expect to see Detroit pull away in the second half. It's a no-brainer for me. Take the Detroit Lions at -4.
Graves on Gridiron with Richard Graves.
Okay, next up we have the 6-5 Denver Broncos going into Houston to take on the 6-5 Texans. The Broncos start this game as 3.5-point underdogs. That immediately caught my attention because whichever way you dress it up right now, folks, this Denver Broncos team is the hottest team in football right now. They're riding a 5-game winning streak, a streak that leaves them just 2 games back of division-leading AFC West rivals, the Kansas City Chiefs. Defensively, they have been outstanding, and that was on display again in last weekend's win over the Cleveland Browns. They force turnovers, they give their offense short fields to work with, and in addition to all that, you've got to say quarterback Russell Wilson is no longer turning the ball over. Better still, he's actually looking comfortable now in this Denver Broncos offense. And he's been helped by the outstanding form of wide receiver Courtland Sutton. Now they have to go to Houston, though, arguably the surprise package of the season. And they've got to face rookie sensation C.J. Stroud and a Texans team who seems to have a mojo about them. Last weekend's loss to the division rival Jacksonville Jaguars, yes, it was a blow to their playoff hopes, but you take this team lightly at your peril. C.J. Stroud has his own downfield playmaker as well, another rookie in wide receiver Tank Dell. Yet, I pause, because this Broncos secondary is now playing at a level that we became really familiar with over the last couple of seasons. And this unit as a whole, you have to say, in Denver, is now playing at a different level to what we saw through the first 5 weeks. It is greatly improved. Through the first 5 games of the season, they gave up 70 to the Miami Dolphins, 23 points in one half to the New York Jets offense. That unit, which struggles to put a point on the board, and their world was caving in, quite frankly. Questions were being asked about Russell Wilson. Questions were being asked about head coach Sean Payton. That has now changed because listen to these statistics. Since week 6, they've taken the ball away 14 times. They have a +9 turnover differential. Opponents in that time have only scored on 7 out of 22 visits to the red zone. What I mean by that is they've only got the ball into the end zone on 7 of those 22 visits to the red zone. And if you're keeping the opposition off the board, limiting them to field goals, you really don't have to do all that much at the opposite end of the field to put points on the board in order to win games. And that's where this matchup actually may pose a problem for Denver. This Houston Texans offense ranks in the top 10 overall, top 10 in passing, and it's in the top 10 when it comes to scoring points. In fact, they've only been held to under 20 points in any game this season on 2 occasions. And over the last 4 games, They've put up 111 points total in that period. This may be why the line makers are favouring the Houston Texans. And if they can match the Denver Broncos when it comes to turnovers in this game, believe me, they have every chance. That being said, don't expect a blowout either way when these two meet on Sunday. I think this will be likely a hard-fought, tense battle, and it could easily come down to whoever has the ball last ends up kicking a game-winning field goal as time expires. For that reason and that reason alone, I'm going to say take the Denver Broncos at plus 3.5.
Graves on Gridiron.
Now we come to our third and final game on this week's show. Without doubt, we're saving the best for last. The 8-3 San Francisco 49ers go into the city of brotherly love to take on the team with the best record in football right now, the 10-1 Philadelphia Eagles. Without question, this is America's game of the week. It's a repeat of last season's NFC Championship game, and it pits what are arguably the two best teams in football right now head to head. It may come as a surprise to see that the Eagles start out this game as 2.5-point underdogs, more so when you consider that they hold home field advantage for this matchup by 2 games. They hold the best record in football this season, and they've already beaten the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, and the Dallas Cowboys at home. They took care of the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs on their own patch just a couple of weeks ago. And let's not forget, of course, they handled the San Francisco 49ers with a place on the Super Bowl on the line here at the end of last season. And this is why the stakes going into this one are so high. If the Philadelphia Eagles win, they'll believe that they've taken a giant step towards securing home field advantage in the postseason this year. However, if the San Francisco 49ers win this game, then it blows the whole playoff picture in the NFC, particularly the race for the number 1 seed, wide open. And when you consider that the Eagles have to go to Dallas next week as well, that is why there's such a great emphasis on this if you're part of the 49ers organization. In their favor, you have to say, is the outstanding record the Philadelphia Eagles have put together over the last 2 years. More impressive, the manner in which time and time again they find ways to win games this season when the odds seemingly are stacking up against them. And you take into account that their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, is now 14-0 in his last 14 games against teams with a winning record. If you ever needed a reason to have belief in this team, there it is. And it's difficult to argue with anybody that puts that statement towards you. On the other side of the coin, though, many people believe that the 49ers are the best team in football when they're healthy. They've already added to an imposing defensive unit in the form of Randy Gregory and Chase Young. But, and I do believe this is huge for them in their secondary, they have lost safety Talanoa Hufanga, potentially a major blow when you're going up against that aerial threat that the Eagles pose. It's going to be a fascinating matchup, whichever way you dress it up. All season long, opponents have been able to make plays through the air against the Eagles' secondary. It ranks a lowly 29th when it comes to defending the pass in the NFL. But countering that is their run defense. They're the 3rd best in the National Football League this season when defending the run. And who is the main weapon for the San Francisco 49ers? It's running back Christian McCaffrey. He already has 15 touchdowns to his name this season, both through the air and on the ground. That might be where this game is won and lost. However, you do have to say and ask the question, what do you do if you're the Philadelphia Eagles when you prepare for this offense, Kyle Shanahan's offense, which throws so many different looks at you, and you've got a game plan, not just for McCaffrey, but Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. Well, last season they went about it by knocking quarterback Brock Purdy out of the game, and ultimately that scuppered the San Francisco 49ers. For me, more so than Christian McCaffrey, it's Brock Purdy who holds the key to this game for the San Francisco 49ers. If he's able to settle into the game and find his rhythm and stay healthy, the 49ers, you have to believe, will exploit the deficiencies in the Eagles' secondary. The 49ers have a defense to complement that as well, which ranks 5 overall, 2nd when it comes to defending the run. They lead the league in points conceded, only giving up 15.5 points per game. And they are the number 1 team when it comes to taking away taking the ball away from the opposition this season. This is another issue you have to factor in for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts has turned the ball over this season. This is the best team the Eagles have faced all year. The only other time they faced a defense, in my opinion, comparable with what the San Francisco 49ers are going to bring into town this week was when they took on the New York Jets. And that team inflicted the only defeat that the Eagles have tasted this season. I like the San Francisco 49ers. It's a long trip, coast to coast. The Philadelphia Eagles have been pretty much impregnable when it comes to playing at the Link. They've taken down all the main threats this season, including going on the road and beating the Super Bowl champions. But I just feel that time is ticking on the Philadelphia Eagles. They've found so many different ways to win games that, frankly, they probably shouldn't have won. I think the San Francisco 49ers come into town and they have the answer, the key to unlock the door to victory against the Eagles. I'm going to go with a line on this. Take the San Francisco 49ers not only to win, but cover the spread as well. Take the 49ers at -2.5 points. Okay, let's recap this week's matchups. We start first of all with the Detroit Lions going to the New Orleans Saints. Take the Lions at -4 points. Then we go to Texas as the Broncos travel to the Houston Texans. Take the Denver Broncos at +3.5 points in that game. Before we finish up with the game of the week, the 49ers go to the Eagles. They take on the crowd in Philadelphia, as well as the best team in football right now. And I think they come out on top. Take the San Francisco 49ers at -2.5 points. I always say at this point, folks, remember first and foremost, it is about enjoyment, it is about entertainment, it is about having fun whilst watching the NFL on Sunday nights. Do not forget that. If you want to read about the matchups we've spoken about on this week's show, then go to the website, www.rdgmedia.uk, click on that Talking Sport tab, and there you'll see Week 13 in the NFL, overcoming the odds, 3 games to watch. All the details are right there. Alternatively, if you just want to debate with me my views on this week's games, then hit me up on X at RichardGraves1, equally on Instagram. We are there, rdgmedia.uk, or on Facebook, the Graves on Gridiron Facebook page. Whatever platform you choose, I'd love to hear from you. Remember, there will be another poll next Monday morning as well, reflecting on Sunday's games where you can have your say. But for now, we're entering the final third of the season. It's hotting up. The race for the playoffs, the chase for the number 1 pick in next year's draft as well. Let's not forget that. That'll be just as important. Whatever happens, there is something to play for. It's likely to be another enthralling week in the NFL. But for now, so long, everybody.
Subscribe to Graves on Gridiron wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep up to date with the latest on Twitter. Search for Richard Graves 1. That's Richard Graves, the number 1.